Assalamu alaikum. Invited speakers, scholars, very good morning and welcome to YKLC Leadership Conference 2019 plenary session, Leadership Journey, Turning Possibility into Reality. This time, speaker, Ms. Sumitra Visvanathan. Ms. Sumitra Visvanathan is the Executive Director of Women's Organization. She is a UK-trained lawyer with over 20 years of experience in human rights. She worked with the United Nations Refugee Agency for over 17 years in Southeast Asia, North Africa, and the Middle East. In her various functions, she has led international teams and managed refugee protection projects in demanding, insecure, and high-stress environments. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Sumitra Visvanathan and enjoy her thought-provoking speech on leadership journey, turning possibility into reality. Ms. Sumitra Visvanathan, time is yours.
Thank you so much, everybody. Good morning to everyone. And Tansri, I have to say that I was so inspired by your speech. I'm 51 years old. I've been working since the time I was 21. And how I wish that when I was 21 years old and embarking on life, I had heard your speech. Because, you know, it's what you say is something that you learn as part of your journey. You learn the hard way, you learn about the value of integrity, you learn about the value of hard work, jujur, ikhlas, usaha, and what's the other one? Tekun, is it? Yeah, jitu. It's brilliant. I wish somebody had told me that. You lot are so lucky. You're so lucky to be exposed to these kinds of thoughts and these sorts of thought leaders. Absorb it, live it, and make it your reality. Okay? You must do that. Right? Good. All right. So I want to talk to you a little bit about, going maybe a little deeper from what Tansri had said, to talk to you about how do you turn potential, like possibility, what you believe you are capable of. How do you turn that into reality? So I want to talk a bit about my own experience and try and relate it to that, all right? And all along, throughout what I want to say to you, I want you to keep thinking about, in yourself, keep asking yourself this question: who am I? Who am I really? Because that is the one fundamental question that you will be asking yourself, you will be struggling with. From time to time, you'll get your eureka moment and you think, oh, so that's who I am. But this is a question that you must continue to ask yourself throughout your life. And I think that I'm not sure whether we will ever, all of us, ever get a full answer to that question. And I think that questioning should only stop when the heart stops beating. It is very, very important part of leadership. You need to constantly ask yourself, who am I really? Who do I want to be? And who am I in this relationship? Who am I in this situation? And who am I when it comes to the person that I want to be in my community, in my country, in my family? Okay? Always ask yourself that, who am I really? Right? Okay. So when I was in the same situation as you all, the same state of life as a student, I was very deeply moved by international issues. I was just appalled by injustice. I was appalled by what was going on in Palestine, the occupied territories as it was known. I was appalled by what was going on in the north of Sri Lanka. I was appalled at Chechnya. You know, there was just so much war and injustice around the world. And in some way, I felt that I had a special duty, a special responsibility, because I considered myself so lucky to come from a country that was peaceful, that was successful, and also that did not have any of these like major natural disasters that led to issues and problems within communities. So I was doing a law degree, and then there was the possibility of doing like a short thesis, and I chose the subject of refugee law. And the more I studied about refugee law, the more I realized that you know, it is so easy for us to turn away from other people just because we think that they're different from us, that they are less than us, that they are not connected to us. And the more I researched refugee issues, the more I realized that we are all part of this circle. You know, I mean, who's watched The Lion King? Right? I mean, what a great film, right? Even the remake. And we're all part of this circle of life. I know I'm from the generation where we watched the cartoon, and the cartoon was so good. But I've also watched this recent one, and it is just as good, trust me. So yeah, so it's all about the circle of life. So how am I relating this to the issue of, you know, of leadership? Leadership is about bringing together all of the forces that you see around you, bringing together, pooling together all of the opportunities that exist around you, and pulling together all of the people that are around you, and being able to see how all of those different forces and different issues and different matters you can re-strategize, you can rework that whole situation and make it end with a good resolution for all. If you're able to do that, you are a leader, right? The leadership comes from within. You need to have the will to want to better things. Doesn't matter what it's about. It can be you want to have more well-resourced bank account. It can be that, you know, you want to have less poverty in the world. It could be that, you know, you want to run further and faster the next time you put on your running shoes. Whatever it is, it's something that needs to come from you. You need to believe that you can get this right. You need to believe that you can achieve this. And you need to then start thinking, again, think about what are the forces around you? What are the opportunities around you? Who are the people around you who you can bring together and pull together in order to get you to the place where you want to go, where you want to be, right? Keep thinking about that. You have to think about everyone and everything that's around you. Then I want to go back now to the question of who am I? Okay, who are you really? As a manager, as a leader, as someone who leads women's aid organization, there are so many stresses, there are so many emergencies, there are so many triggers for annoyance, for irritation, for anger, for stress, and so forth. So when I ask myself, who am I as a person, I then identify that I am someone who wants to make sure that people are happy, are safe, are content, and as far as possible are able to manage their negative emotions well. So when I am confronted with a workplace emergency, when I am confronted with, you know, a deadline that's not been met by my team or whatever, how do I react? I don't fly off the handle. It is so easy to fly off the handle, right? I don't fly off the handle. Instead, I say, okay, you know what? This is not where we should have gone. This is not the way it should have done. We should have done things differently. But instead of putting people down and telling people, you're really not good enough, you haven't done this well enough, you're really, your performance really is not quite what was expected, it was disappointing, and then raising voices, etc. What you need to do is you need to talk everybody through it, express that things really are not where they should be, but do it in a way that keeps people happy, calm, motivated to get it better the next time round. All right? So that is the attitude. That is the attitude that you need to build for yourself. Because trust me, it actually really works. It works so well when you are working towards a leadership position, if you're already in a leadership position, when the people around you recognize that you indeed have that ability to chill, calm, pick out what the issues are, and say, right, okay, we're going to take this now and we're going to move forward, they will gravitate to you naturally as their leader, all right? Because that's what people want. That's really what people want. Okay, so if we go back again a little bit to my experience, I had that dream, and then the dream of wanting to eradicate injustice. And it was just general, because when you're younger, and when I think back, and I guess when at your stage, there are things that you want to do, things that you want to achieve, but somehow it's kind of like, it's still like, plasticine, it's malleable, but you're not sure what kind of shape you want to turn it into, right? It's just that general idea of, this is who I want to be, this is where I want to go, this is the kind of professional I would like, the kind of profession I would like to be in. But you don't really know for sure what is it that you want to be. So again, look around you, pull all the forces that are around you, look at the people who are around you, and use that to try and mold and shape your thoughts and desires. Okay? So what did I do? I had that little dissertation that I did. It was on refugee law. I learned more, and then that it became very clear to me. So as I feel so motivated to eradicate injustice where I find and see it. I know a little bit about the issues faced by refugees. I know more about the international legal regime, about protecting refugees. I know a little bit more about the actors within that international legal regime to protect refugees. So I learned about, international refugee law, but I also learned about UNHCR. So then I had my sort of single-minded determination. I need to work with UNHCR. Not that I have to work with UNHCR, or I want to work with UNHCR, but I need to work with UNHCR because I knew straight away that this was going to be my platform to eradicate injustice. So then I started to shape everything that I was learning to make it very much human rights based and very much refugee based. And then I started sending off my CVs for internships. And then I was really lucky, somehow, being at the right place at the right time, having spoken to the right people at the right time, perhaps, straight out of university, I got offered a job with UNHCR in Indonesia. And that's how I started my career. So then I went from Indonesia to Hong Kong, to Cambodia, to Vietnam, back to Hong Kong. Then I was based in Malaysia, and then I went off to South Asia, and finally when I ended my career with UNHCR, I finished off in Baghdad. And throughout that whole situation, career in UNHCR, again, I was like, I was so focused and motivated on the job. and so focused on trying to learn as much as I could, and also trying to make sure that I turned into a reality this personal creed that I have, that you can either create stress or you can relieve stress for yourself and for people around you. And I always tried, as far as possible, to be the one who, relieved stress, found solutions, didn't fly off the handle, appreciated everyone, didn't judge them. So somehow that personal creed was recognized by others, and then I, progressively started to move up the ladder. Until when I ended my UN career, when I resigned from the UN, I was heading a very large operation in the middle of the desert in Iraq, protecting refugees, and that was one of the hardest and the most educational experience that I have ever had in my life, and probably ever. So what I'm trying to communicate to you is, we are all leaders in different ways. We all have the capacity to be leaders. And if you feel that you need to have that validation to be recognized by others as a leader, you have to go through your own process, and you need to strengthen your own headspace, right? You need to ask yourself, who am I? Who am I in the situation? Who am I within my family? Who am I in this relationship? Who am I as a person? You need to keep asking yourself that question, right? You need to recognize the opportunities around you, the people around you, the situations around you. You need to pull everything together and try to see how you can rework that to your advantage without harming others, of course. You need to keep doing that. And then you need to keep building and building and building and focusing. And remember what Tan Sri said, right? It's about focusing on your professionalism, your integrity, your knowledge, building yourself up as a professional. So those are the things that are always kind of like moving around each other, and that you're going to need to really focus on. So now I am the Executive Director of Women's Aid Organization. I am so proud to come back, pulang ke tanah air. I am so proud to be able to be in a position that creates social impact for my own country. There's nothing like it. I tell you, the feeling is amazing. I am so proud to work with a team that is so committed and dedicated to making Malaysia a better place for women and children. And it's again, it is about the continuation of the journey. 10 years ago, I had no idea that I would be in this situation, in Malaysia, being recognized as, a women's leader in Malaysia. I never thought that would even be possible. But has been my journey, and it has been my journey because of Jitu that Tan Sri talked about. Unconsciously, it's what I feel, many leaders actually adopt. It has been part of my journey. It's anchored on, anchored by, that constant questioning of who am I? What is it that I have to give? Why do I feel that I need to continue along this path? Recognizing all the actors around me. So like, for instance, with Women's Aid Organization, in my capacity as Executive Director, what and who are the forces around me? The forces around me are governments, the Ministry of Women, parliamentarians, policy makers, think tanks, members of the public, other NGOs, academics. You know, there are so many different actors and forces who are either interested in women's issues, who have like clear vision and very strong action already on women's issues, or who should be interested in women's issues but are not. So that's what WAO does. We pull all of this together and we do what we do. So we give service, we lobby, we advocate, and we bring change to women and children in Malaysia. Every single person in WAO is a leader because we recognize them to be such, and we give them the space to be such, and we always encourage them to keep asking themselves that question, who am I really? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sumitra Visvanathan, for her very thought-provoking speech. If I recap, in her speech, she tried to say us, keep asking the question self, who am I? And bringing together all of possibilities around. And she also shared her experience, the very emerging issue right now in refugee crisis. So, and he also recognized the Thansri, the former Jijo. So I thought that as a YK scholar, we should follow her experience in that realm. So before I'm going to asking the question from the panel, from the audience, I would like to ask a question. So you have expertise on refugee crisis, and as per we know, the world currently facing huge refugee crisis in the world. For example, in Syrian refugee crisis, here is near about 3 million people fled to Germany and other states. And also in the context of my country in Bangladesh, is Rohingya refugee. They fled to Bangladesh is near about 1.5 million. So from your expertise, I would like to ask a question, how we YK scholar can contribute into tackling or mitigating this problem more sustainably?
That's a really excellent question. So number one, I think for YK as an institution, perhaps, I don't know whether you do already, but you know, offering the possibility of scholarships to young people from conflict zones, I think would be a wonderful thing to do. I believe that you do already, right? Because there are, I don't know, do you have something special for refugee students? Yes, great. What I would say is we all know what the standards are, right? We know that fundamentally a refugee is someone who cannot return to their country because of you know, race, religion, nationality, their social group, their political opinion, but now and now, more and more because of a situation of conflict, a situation where, you know, on a very fundamental level, you are harmed, your life or liberty is very much at risk because of conflict. More and more we're going to see climate, environmental change and so forth. So what I would say is I want to throw the challenge back to YH scholars and, YK scholars, and challenge you all to perhaps kick off a project amongst yourselves to come up with ideas that could potentially be impactful and could assist refugees and countries to better manage the refugee migration issue, right? Because remember that the highest percentage, most of the world's refugees are being hosted in some of the world's poorest countries, all right? And this is what, you know, more advanced countries, the US, Europe, etc., you know, when they put up their walls and when they they lock the gate and they say, no more, we're not taking it. We're talking about in terms of thousands, right? But countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Lebanon, Jordan, etc. I mean, they host and shelter people in the millions. So, so of course the North-South divide, that whole discriminatory approach, that lack of recognition of your international obligation, we all know that, and frankly, it's just like boring to keep talking about it. So maybe I want to throw a challenge to you all, and I wonder whether YK would like to do something where you can have your idea workshops, perhaps, and you can maybe even do it as a project. Try to think of things that you can do, ideas or maybe even startups to make life better for refugees, but also make hosting easier for host countries. Your country, for instance, has been hosting Rohingya for generations, and so have we in Malaysia, right? We have had Rohingya refugees in Malaysia for many years, and I wish that we could take better care of them.
Thank you. So now floor is open for question. Please, is there any question to Ms. Sumitra Visvanathan?
Hi, my name is Diana, and I'm a final year incoming student at Imperial College in London, and I currently study material science and engineering. So my question to you is, well, I'll preface it first. There's a German word called, I think it's pronounced Weltschmerz. I'm not really sure about the pronunciation, but what it basically means is a sort of a worldly wariness with how the world is what we perceive the world should be, our ideals of the world, versus what it actually is now. So it's kind of like a feeling of dejection about we should be doing more, but because everything is so chaotic and not ideal, it's kind of like, should I even bother trying? And I'm sure that being someone who's a specialist in especially refugee issues, it comes quite often. How do you deal with that when it comes, if it does come? How do you deal with it? And what advice would you give to people who, well, to us, who are going to hopefully carry on your legacy and in other areas as well? Thank you.
Thanks so much for that question. Again, very, very important question. And the despair, right? I know that word, but I also can't pronounce it. It's despair. It's got so many different words: compassion fatigue, burnout, all of those negative terms. It is unavoidable, right? You can be. Okay, so let me give you an example. So there was, in my old job with UNHCR, I used to also do something called, one of the very important things that I did was called Humanitarian Negotiation. And humanitarian negotiation is about negotiating with your opposing partner, like sometimes very opposing, very angry people, in order to get a good humanitarian outcome for people that you protect. So there was this one situation I was in many years ago where I had to negotiate with a general in order to get permission for refugees with cancer to leave the refugee camp and go to the local hospital for chemotherapy. It was constant, like practically every other day. When someone had to go for chemo, I had to go to that office and drink tea and negotiate. And it was really hard because his views were so negative, and he'll be like, these people are here and they're stealing our things and etc. So I had to listen to this all the time, but at the back of my mind was, can you just please be a human being? This man is going to die unless he gets his chemotherapy. Please just let him go. But of course I can't say that, because he's the general and we have to drink tea together. So I kind of, I managed it face to face with him. So every time we had to go through this, and eventually they'd say yes, and eventually this poor guy could go. But when I used to go back to my barracks at the end of the day, it'll be so tired. And sometimes I'll be like walking back and the tears would just be pouring down my face, not because I'm like, tired or angry or whatever. I just feel so sad. Like, what is it with you? Can't you just see that this man is going to die? So, and after many, many weeks of that, it really had a huge impact on me. I had so much despair. And how do you deal with that? Again, it requires a lot of self-examination. And, people tell you things like, pull your socks up, come on, and I'm sure the guys hear this a lot, man up, come on, be strong. And you all are a new generation. And what I want to say is, if you say that, if you hear that, and especially if people try to make it gender-based, and especially for the young men, if they say, you're a man, come on, be a man, push back, please, right? Because that's a very damaging attitude. Boys, please push back. If someone tries to tell you how you should be as a man, that you should be emotionless and tough and, etc., please push back, because we are all people, right? We are all the same. We have emotions, we have needs, and you know what? If you want to cry, just cry, and don't let anyone make fun of you, all right? So going back to my story, so I would say that it's really important, to do that self-reflection, to keep, going through your mind, why am I doing this? Go back to basics, why am I doing this? At the end of the day, is it really worthwhile? If at some point, the despair is so strong that you are really questioning, is this really worthwhile? And if you ask yourself that question, you think, actually, it's not worth it, and you know what? Just walk away, because your well-being and your health is so much more important than reaching a professional objective, quite frankly. I will also want to say that I want you all in your generation to be more aware of mental health, okay? Good question, because years and years of fighting against that kind of despair, I actually developed something called secondary PTSD. So PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, but because I was constantly exposed to people who have PTSD, so I kind of adopted some of that. So one of the symptoms of secondary PTSD is depression. So I suffer from chronic depression. It may not be obvious to you, but I do. I have it. It's important that we talk about it, and that it's not seen as, something that makes me less than who I am. So every morning, I wake up and I take a pill to help me not get too sad. And it's something that I decided to start taking throughout my career in the UN, because, it was so high stress, and, I've seen a lot of death and a lot of etc. So I used to go through periods where I felt that the sadness was so overwhelming that I needed help. So, the doctor would prescribe 3 months, 6 months, and then, slowly get myself off it and I'll be fine. But now I feel that, at my age, and given all of the experience, and also the fact that I still want to be high functioning for Women's Aid Organization, so I take that one pill every morning. And it's like a vitamin for me, together with my supplements, with my fish oil and my vitamin C and all of that. So, when I was your age, it was something that nobody talked about. And especially as a woman, as a young woman in the humanitarian field, you couldn't So I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want the men to look at me and think that I was weak, right? So I also had other things, certain things to fulfill. So again, now, to the girls, be strong, be empowered. Don't let anyone talk down to you. No mansplaining. Mansplaining is, pushback if it ever happens. But at the same time, be true and real and authentic, and don't man up, all right? Don't tell yourself that in order to succeed in the world, you need to man up. Don't do that, okay? Don't do that to yourself. Be who you are. Be who you are, right? And if anybody tries to tell you that who you are is not good enough, don't buy it, please, and push back. Okay?
Any question?
Hello, my name is Ihsan. I actually have two questions. So one is that, during your education, what would you say helped you the most, helped you in, for your current journey right now? Maybe it could be your knowledge or possibly connections. And for my second question, looking back, what would you do more? And what would you advise us to do and look forward to?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. When I was in uni, I was very active in the Students' Union. And I, there was the International Students Association. And then, there were issues that we felt I felt very strongly about, the issues around Palestine. And I was in England, so sometimes, we'd have demonstrations in London, and I would go on demonstrations. And so so I did all of that stuff to, to kind of really explore what was important to me. And so I feel that what really helped me in my studies was that extracurricular thing, the involvement in the student union, the learning about issues, most of my learning about international issues actually came from my work in the student union because of the exposure to all the international students. I remember my first week at uni, I met one of my good, really, really good Palestinian friends. His name is Jawad. And he was born in Bethlehem. And I was like, wow, I'm meeting someone who's born in Bethlehem. This is so cool, So, yeah, so even basic things like that, it's about the exposure, right? And get involved in extracurricular activities, learn a skill, do a workshop, learn how to make a leather wallet, so this is the time where you need to go out there and get involved in movements and learn that skill and, become a warrior for sustainability, that sort of thing. So it's about more than passing exams, right? So that helped me, and I hope that if it's something that you can also do, that it will help you.
Hi, morning. My name is Belinda, and I just graduated from the Australian National University. My question today is, I'm wondering, can you share with us the progress on how is the legalization of work rights for refugees currently in 2019?
Okay, thank you so much. So the big issue is about government needing to recognize that refugees have rights, number one, and number two, government documenting refugees, right? They must document refugees, because when you have that documentation, you have that legal status, it means that the rights that international law gives you are being realized. So it means also that you will not just be able to get a job, but you will be protected by the law when you're performing that job, right? It means that you will have, you can have SOCSO contribution. So if you're harmed in the context of your work or whatever, you can get compensation, etc. It's just very, very hard for the government to make that great leap. I would say that right now it's really not going very far anytime soon. Recently, we met with the UN Special Rapporteur on Poverty, and this is Philip Alston, and he has just released his preliminary report. I would very strongly encourage you to download that report and read it, because his report is about extreme poverty. And he gave our government a really hard time, because he said that the way we measure poverty is actually wrong and incomplete, and we're not recognizing that actually poverty is a lot more widespread than the government is reporting. And then he looked at all the different groups that are particularly vulnerable, like people with disabilities, people with health conditions, the B40 community, and also refugees and stateless persons. And he identified that our inability to respond appropriately to refugees and stateless persons, like giving them the right to work, is creating extreme poverty in Malaysia that we are not recording because they're not documented. And the numbers can go up to, I think the numbers are about 1 million or more than 1 million actually. And in a country of 38, 37 million, 1 million you already know are very poor is a lot, right? So I feel that we all need to do more to perhaps lobby and pressure the government to document and to give right to work. I would say that actually I don't think it's going very far right now, which means that we have a lot to do.
Hi, hello, my name is Faris. I'm coming into undergraduate. So a common perception about community and humanitarian work is that it's not as financially rewarding compared to the level of stress that you face. And the greater good doesn't always pay the bills. So I have two questions regarding this. Firstly, how do you navigate both your passion as well as the financial obligations? And secondly, how do you think we can make humanitarian work easier so that it's not asking for too much and relatively rewards too little, at least financially? Thank you.
Yeah, getting some really excellent questions. Thank you so much. When I returned to Malaysia, I learned that there were people who were very dedicated human rights activists who were earning 1,000 ringgit a month. Right? Is that possible? Is that even possible? So, 10 years of working in the human rights field and you're earning 1,000 ringgit a month. Okay. So this here now is the challenge that we put out to donors, to corporates, and to sponsors. I would argue that given the amount of stress and semangat that goes into humanitarian work, that it should actually be paid better than others. But maybe that's going too far. But then you also have, organizations like Mercy, who have very much done so much to professionalize that whole area of humanitarian support, and they pay well. They don't pay as well as some of the multinationals or whatever, but their pay scale is good. WAO's pay scale is good, but we are able to get there because we do the lobbying and we do the fundraising and we convince the corporates to give us sufficient support so that we can pay our staff appropriately. It is unfortunately a reality for many people who work in this area. It's not necessarily the case for every organization that's in this area, but we all need to do more to elevate humanitarian work. And the way to elevate humanitarian work also is to ensure that we establish professional standards. So like for instance, WAO and Mercy together, we are members of this international standard called the Core Humanitarian Standard, and or CHS, and it is international certification. WAO is working towards it. Mercy already has it, and so they're supporting WAO to go through the audit process. Once we are audited and if we come out clear, then we will actually be certified under that international standard. So, that means that we are not fly by night. We're really serious about what we do. And so I think donors really need to pay attention to that.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hello. Hi, Ms. Sumitra. Thank you for your speech. My name is Zachi, and I'm currently pursuing my law degree in University of Malaya. So I'm sure you're aware of the fact that Malaysia is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention. So there are two folds to my question. First, do you think there is a possibility of Malaysia ratifying the Refugee Convention in the near future? And second, how much of a great leap of an improvement would it be to the refugees' welfare and rights if we were to ratify the convention? Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So, this current government's manifesto actually stated that they would ratify the convention. So, quite frankly, whether they ratify the convention or not, the most important thing is for its content to be made a reality locally. So there are countries that haven't signed on, but they have local regulations, administrative regulations, and local laws that give refugees access to rights and protect them. In the same way, it's not enough that for Malaysia to just sign on to the convention, but then don't do anything to make it a reality. For me, what would be super important is for the government to sign on. Actually, it's important for them to sign on because they said that they have done so they would do so in the manifesto. But more importantly, that they put in place the local regulations and administrative regulations, and also perhaps change some laws to make sure that the rights that are within the Refugee Convention are also made accessible to refugees in Malaysia. Would it make their lives much better? It absolutely would, because for the three things that refugees find hardest to handle in Malaysia is the right to work, the right to education, and the right to health. All three are so severely restricted to them because they are not recognized.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
For information, we want to take another 2 or 3 questions. So, Kenny?
Yep. Thank you so much for the heartfelt conversations that we have. My name is Kenneth. I'm a student at UC Berkeley doing industrial engineering. So my question to you is, just prefacing a little bit, a lot of the times activists, they are the people who need to go against the odds, and they have to conquer public or societal norms. So for example, like for refugees, for instance, maybe the masses, they are not the most welcoming to them, or even for like Hong Kong protests, some might say that they are destroying businesses. So how do you defy public perception and break the stigma, and how do you keep your vision strong when things aren't really in your favor? Thank you.
I think that would be a workshop in itself, that question. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I mean, we have the myth of public perception and then the reality of what people really feel. And I actually also find it quite difficult to try and navigate through that. And perhaps I can use the example of equality, right? Gender equality. People that I speak to on a one-to-one level, you know, accept that indeed, you know, gender equality is critical, it's needed. Women are currently in a less equal situation in our community, and, you know, but, you know, men and women must indeed be equal in order for there to be, you know, happiness and prosperity across the board. But then, you know, when there's that broad brush statements being made, especially in media and especially, you know, from politicians or other thought leaders, what's put across is that Malaysia is not ready for it. Malaysian women may not actually want it. Some women actually want their husband to have more power than them in the house, and, you know, and so that's always being put out. So how do you counter negative public perception? I would say that, okay, I'll give you an example of what WAO tries to do. We try to claim the space. So we try to claim the space in Parliament by briefing as many MPs as possible and lobbying on our points, things that are important to us, and then hoping that whatever comes out in Parliament would actually be reflective of what we believe and what we want to see. We try to claim the social media space. WAO actually is quite active in social media. So when we have our Facebook, but also we have our Instagram, womensaid.org. Please follow us, thank you. And then social media, and then also in terms of print and online media, WAO, again, you know, we really do try to claim that space. We are very active in print and media, and we have about an average of 400 media mentions a year, which means that every day there is at least one WAO quote or story in some media in Malaysia. So, so we try to claim the space and try to, that way, influence public perception. Yeah, when confronted with negative public perception, the only thing that we can do really is to stand up and put across the what is our view, and perhaps a more positive spin on what might be going on. I hope that answers your question. There's no real answer one way or the other.
Hi, my name is Takif, and I just finished my A-levels. So my question is specifically about stateless people, especially stateless children. And the question is about, I feel that stateless people are in like a very weird situation. So when you compare them to like refugees or like Rohingyas, for example, at the end of the day, when it's safe enough and when they do get full citizenship, I feel that they do want to repatriate to their country. So like, I just want from your expertise working in an aid organization, is there like a sense of distinction when like catering towards like stateless children in comparison to like normal refugees? Yeah.
The approach actually needs to be different, because the international regimes that sort of govern each group is actually different. So you have the Refugee Convention for refugees, and then there's the Statelessness Conventions. There are two Statelessness Conventions when it comes to stateless persons. And then the thing is, with a lot of stateless persons in Malaysia, a lot of stateless kids in Malaysia, actually they are only de facto stateless. They're not de jure stateless, because mostly it's because of some kind of administrative step that was not followed or not complied with when the child was born, and so the child was rendered stateless. So it's about correcting that process so that the child will be able to acquire Malaysian nationality, for instance. And then there also, so that's one thing. The other thing also is when we have very sexist nationality laws. So for instance, let's say I am overseas and I'm married to a non-Malaysian, but we're living overseas, and then we have a child. That child will not be entitled to inherit my Malaysian nationality, but only that of the father. So as a woman, I cannot confer my nationality on the child. So what if I am married to a Rohingya in Bangladesh who already doesn't have nationality? I have nationality, but I cannot confer my nationality on my child. Why? Because I'm a woman. So that also needs to be changed. We know, and also we know so much about, we have heard so much about ex-plantation families who were in plantations that have ceased to operate, and then they migrated to the city, so they may not actually have any documents to prove, the parents, to prove that they are Malaysian. So when they have kids, then those kids also somehow are rendered stateless. So, what is required there really is to fix the regulations, the registration regulations. So it's about JPN lah, Jabatan Pendaftaran Negara, that they need to have more humane approach towards cases like this, so that people can actually no longer be stateless. They don't need to be stateless. But with refugees, it's different, because what is needed is the recognition that they cannot return to their country of origin. So they have a country of origin to return to, but they cannot return there. The complexity is when you have people like the Rohingya who are both refugees and stateless. Then I would say that we need to move more towards, finding ways to help them acquire Malaysian nationality, because there are generations of stateless Rohingya who have been born in Malaysia, actually, and so they should have Malaysian nationality because they are Malaysian. You look at them and you talk to them, and you cannot distinguish them from other Malaysians.
Thank you so much.
Such a wonderful question and answer session. Please give round of applause for Ms. Sumitra Visvanathan. And if I recap the question and answer session, here she gave emphasis on mental health and depression. We should give focus on post-traumatic stress disorder. And if you would like to be a good leader, then we should join in various extracurricular activities. And from her expertise, she tried to say us how to tackle the refugee crisis, and it's really, really amazing. And please, thanks to Ms. Sumitra Visvanathan for his expertise and sharing this moment.